that. Oh, and there's Paloma. I'm really glad that we waited an extra second.
There's Amy.
Yeah, so this is Paloma as our book club member. Hi, Paloma.
Hi.
We are just getting started here. We are recording today, so if you don't want to be on camera or on the film, you can go ahead and turn your camera off. Welcome, everybody. My name is Lauren from Second Start to the Right Books. Just in case you missed the warning, and forgive me, those of you that have heard it a million times already, we are recording today, so if you don't want to be on film, please go ahead and turn your camera off. Second Start to the Right is so excited to have with us today one of our very favorite authors.
Yay!
We are celebrating her newest book, The Space Between Lost and Found, but you may remember her from when we read Extraordinary Birds, which was her debut, I believe.
Yes, it was.
So please join me, everyone, in giving a virtual round of applause for Sandy Stark McGinnis.
Yay! Thanks for having me. It's great to be here. Do you want me to just tell a little bit about my background and?
Yeah, that would be awesome. We can learn a little bit about you and
sure.
As an author and as a person.
Yeah, oh, sounds good. I can do that. Well, I live in California. I teach 5th grade. We're about ready to start school. And I have been writing probably for, I would say, on and off for about 20 years. But I started out as a poet. That was, I loved poetry. I loved writing poetry. And then it kind of evolved to where I started writing prose. And I have my master's degree in creative writing. And that's where I wrote my first novel, because I had to do it to get my master's degree. And it was an adult literary novel. And then I kind of discovered that there was a young adult and middle grade genres out there. And I had a mentor who was working with me on actually a young adult novel. And she said, you know, I really think that you have a middle grade voice. And I took her advice, and I actually started writing a first draft of Extraordinary Birds. And I'll tell you a little bit about Extraordinary Birds, because it's obviously will always be special because it's my debut and my first novel that was published. But Extraordinary Birds was actually inspired by a newspaper article I had read, gosh, a long time ago, probably back in 2007, 2008. And it reported an incident where a mother in a methamphetamine rage physically attacked her young daughter. And I thought a lot about that young girl and how she would navigate being able to heal from that experience. And that's where December was inspired, in that process of me wondering what that would look like, that healing process of a 11, 12-year-old young girl. And I also wanted to deal a lot with themes of home and flight. And so all those elements came together. And the first draft, I wrote the first draft of Extraordinary Birds, which actually has always been called Extraordinary Birds. So from the very first draft, it went through, I would say, about 8, 9, 10 drafts before, with me working on it with my agent, and then probably another 3 to 4 with the editor, Allison Moore at Bloomsbury. And so And it took I would say about 5 to 6 years. I worked on it before I acquired an agent, and then another year before it was published. So yeah, quite the process.
It's a long time. That sounds like you had to have a lot of like perseverance and dedication and
Definitely. And at the time I got married and I moved and I had kids. One of the things that I always share with younger people is that I was a swimmer. I swam competitively from like 5 years old to through high school. And I was really dedicated. And I used to get up at 4 o'clock every morning in high school. And I would swim from 5:30 to 7, and then I would go to school. And then we would swim again. We had swim practice after school for a couple hours. And I think that really helped me later on in being able to be disciplined enough to sit down and make myself right. And because I have a very structured, I get up at the same time and I write at the same time every day. And I think that was a little easier for me because I had that background of swimming. So I think that really helps me in being able to, be dedicated to a task. So.
That's awesome. Was it the same for your second book, for the space between Lost and Found? Was it a similar process?
Actually, the space between Lost and Found, the process was a little bit, I wouldn't say easier, but a little bit faster because I learned a lot as far as being more efficient in how I worked. When I first started writing Extraordinary Birds, I refused to outline anything. And I would just let me write. I just want to write. But with the space between Lost and Found, my agent wanted me to outline the story, and then which really helped and made things, like I said, a lot more efficient once I started writing. And now, guess what I do? I outline my stories because it definitely helps as far as time wise. So
that's wonderful. It's good to know too that you can learn from the process.
Definitely. I'm still learning. It's I think you have to definitely be open to that, and you have to be dedicated to, or having the space to make sure that you're taking people's advice, and you kind of learn to kind of know and trust certain voices that are giving you feedback. And you always, I think, if you're a creative person, I think you, and hopefully you instinctively, and if you don't, you probably should work on it, but know instinctively what feedback rings true for you and your story. I think that's really important to be able to learn how to decipher, feedback and those people who you trust. And yeah, so I've been very lucky to run into my agent. My agent, Patricia Nelson, is one of those voices. She's pretty amazing, and we just click. And then my editor at Bloomsbury for both Extraordinary Birds and The Space Between Lost and Found, Allison Moore, we just clicked too. So far my experience has been really, really good.
That's amazing too. Like, just
yeah.
good experience. Yeah. And now it's been a while since I've read The Space Between Lost and Found. That was one of the last, I think I was telling you when we were doing our test call, it's one of the last ARCs that I got, like a physical advanced reader copy.
Yeah.
And so correct me if I'm wrong, it's set in Arizona, is that right?
It's set in, a fiction Arizona, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
You did such a great job of capturing, we're not super far from Arizona, obviously, here in Colorado.
Right.
So I've done a lot of road trips there. And you did such a great job of capturing that landscape and that imagery in the story. How did you do that?
Well, actually, I've spent a lot of time, particularly in New Mexico, but in the high desert. And I've always wanted to set a story because it's one of the, my favorite places to be, because it's just the topography and the setting is just amazing. And I thought it actually, obviously I chose the desert because I compared the desert and the ocean. And I thought I really wanted to kind of play with that, those two settings and compare and contrast. And I thought it fit really well with comparing Cassie and particularly Cassie's mom and what was happening to Cassie's mom as far as the early onset Alzheimer's. So I really tried to take the setting and have it play a part and be reflective of the subjectivity of the characters. So
it was beautiful. You did an amazing job with that. And the mural too, that the kids are working on together. Again, the imagery, I come from, like we were talking about, Pennsylvania, closer to the ocean. I live now in Colorado, which is, desert. And so I have a connection to both. And I just thought that you did an amazing job with that.
Thanks.
Of course.
Well, look who's here.
Allison. Hi, Allison.
Oh, she missed me. She missed me praising her.
Allison, we are recording today, so if you don't
Hi.
Your camera off. I always feel bad for the people who log in early and have to listen to me give that warning.
I had some forgetting password issues, but I'm here now. Hello.
Hey.
So, Sandy, this is your editor, you were just saying, right? Allison?
Yes, the one and only.
Allison, thank you for being here with us, too.
Oh, I should have followed your instructions to try to log in earlier, so I knew that I knew how to, but it's fine.
So we were just talking about the imagery in The Space Between Lost and Found. As an editor, Allison, was there anything for you that really jumped out or that struck you about The Space Between Lost and Found?
About imagery?
Yeah, imagery or anything in the story. For me, it was the imagery. I was telling Sandy, such a good job of capturing, that Arizona landscape, and the mural, the imagery of the mural was just so beautiful. Was there anything in the story that really jumped out in that same way for you?
Sure. I think it's interesting to think about what you sort of get out of the story and then how we were working on the cover also. And I think just the idea of all of the feelings floating around her head and sort of how to sort of show that. And I think sort of thinking about how dolphins swim around an ocean, and then also how these characters are sort of very young but have very complex feelings that they haven't totally worked out yet, was just one of the feelings that really stood out to me, and I think is interesting, and it was just really true to sort of being that age and having a lot of complex feelings but not totally landing on how to solidify them. And I think just the sort of the motion of it and sort of how just the ocean imagery and how that kind of works in with family and all of that was really powerful to me. And also with art too, and how art isn't something solidified. It's something that sort of goes in whatever direction you need it to and sort of changes over time.
Absolutely, and you actually hit on something that I wanted to ask you about, Sandy. And I'm so sorry, I thought my dog was gonna bark. So if I mute myself real quick, that's why. Sandy, you write about this very complex issue. Actually, both of your books, they're very complex issues, but you really get inside the head of that like 11, 12-year-old girl. How do you do that? Or what was your inspiration for that?
You know what? I think some of it, I think, is just like natural, but I've also been around 8, 9, 10, 11, 12-year-olds practically all my life because I have been a teacher for 17 years. And then prior to that, I was a swim coach, and all my jobs have been working with kids. So but I think it's also when I look back at my own life, when I was 9, 10, 11, 12, that time period is what I connect with the most. And I think that I can really remember myself thinking about the world in general and thinking complex things and also how I fit into that world. I mean, I can still consciously, if someone were to ask me, well, when were you conscious of yourself? And I would say when I was 9, 10, 11, 12, that period of time was, an awareness of the world and my own, and how I, navigate the world. So.
And that's the thing, you really captured that, like how kids navigate, even the friendships, like and how they deteriorate and never really deteriorate. There's like you drift and you come back, and there's like maybe you play together one day, but then you're still not talking the next day. There was such complexity there. It was very impressive.
Thank you. Thanks. Well, I was just going to say, I think it's important to write complex characters who are, 9, 10, 11, 12, because they are complex and they do their emotions and the way that they see the world kind of ebb and flows because they're trying to figure things out. And it's okay for them to do that, and they need to understand that that's okay. And so I think it's important to be respectful, when you're writing characters of middle grade characters, to really kind of dive into that complexity. Plus, it's really fun, and it makes it for the writer. It makes it interesting, and I'm sure for the reader and the editor and whoever else has to read it, So.
Because it was absolutely, both of your books were so fun to read. I'm usually a slow reader, and for both of them, I just couldn't stop. I was devouring them. So that definitely came across. And I did want to mention, Paloma and Denisa, if either of you have questions that you would like to ask, you can either drop them in the chat or just make a note in the chat that you have a question, and we can call on you to unmute. We're a small enough group that you can unmute. That you can unmute and ask your question directly. And I do apologize. There's just someone outside, and my dog is certain that she's keeping all of us safe right now. Okay, so if you do have any questions, go ahead and drop that in the chat. Otherwise, we will just go. Allison,
Can I ask you a question?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Sure. So Sandy, so you are a writer, obviously, and you've been a poet and you've been a teacher. Why did you decide to focus on visual art through this character?
Why did I decide to focus on a visual? Is that what you said?
On visual art through this character, like this artists doing like visual art and math, like rather than writing, which is like what you do.
Yeah. Gosh, I don't like.
I don't think I've ever talked about that.
I don't know. Well, because I incorporated some things about Georgia O'Keeffe, and I think it kind of was inspired by that. And obviously, Georgia O'Keeffe is known for her high desert settings in her artwork, and her art is sparse, but it's also complex, and which I think kind of mirrors my writing style, but also the complexity of the stories that I was telling. And I think it just kind of and it ended up fitting pretty well. But I'm also I have in Extraordinary Birds, December, her passion was birds and learning those bird facts, and that's how she helped her navigate her world. And I think obviously Cassie in The Space Between Lost and Found, not only math but also her art helps her. So and I think in the one that I'm writing now, the character has a passion and that helps her. And I think that's kind of a theme of for me it just happens. But given my upbringing and my passion, which was swimming, which definitely helped me navigate my world and kind of help me process life in general. It fits with my characters and that I create. So I don't know if that answered your question.
It's all really interesting.
Awesome. And Sandy, we do have some questions coming through the chat.
Okay.
Paloma, do you want to go ahead and unmute to ask your question? I'll give you a minute. I'm also more than happy to ask it for you if you're not comfortable. I'll give Paloma.
Sorry, my dog is being really loud right now.
Oh.
How long did the Space Between Lost and Found take you to write?
Oh, okay. Actually, not as long as Extraordinary Birds, because I had that outline, and I would say it took me probably about a year and a half, on and off. So, but once I had that outline, that first draft, which I usually my perspective on first drafts is just to get it out as fast as I can, because it helps me to connect with the voice, and for me, that's the most important goal in that first draft, is to connect with the voice. So, so about a year and a half, I would say.
Thank you. And then Vanitha, we have a question from Vanitha, and definitely correct me if I'm saying your name wrong. If you'd like to unmute and ask your question, go right ahead. Let's see. Looks like there might be a microphone issue. I can see it unmuting. I just can't hear anything. Oh, okay.
On mine, it says her mic is mute, so I don't know if that's the issue. So
yeah, it looked like it was unmuting, and then the microphone didn't. Oh, there goes my dog. If everyone can hear her, she's very growly. The question that came through is, did you use anything in your life to create ideas for your books?
Do I use anything in my life?
Yes.
Actually, I think The Space Between Lost and Found was a lot more personal than Extraordinary Birds as far as using experience in my own life. But The Space Between Lost and Found, my own father suffered from Alzheimer's. So the inspiration was kind of my experience in dealing with that, my family's experience with dealing with that. And then I incorporate, like, with the high desert setting, just some of the things that I like and I want to explore and that I connect with. So there might be elements of, things that are in my own personal life that I use in my books.
That's so interesting. I was wondering that too, especially with how well you wrote the character of Kathy Found. That's very interesting to hear.
And of course, I was a swimmer. So a lot of that imagery with her mom and her past. And I think it's a photograph that Cassie described seeing of her mom holding a trophy. That is very autobiographical because there was one particular photograph of me when I was younger holding a trophy that I used to describe that photograph. So, like I said, there were elements of and the way Cassie describes her mom's hands those are my mom's hands. So, oh no, that was actually in Extraordinary Birds. The way December describes Eleanor's hands. Eleanor's hands are my mom's hands. So
that's so beautiful. So there's like little pieces of you throughout the book.
Yeah.
And did you have any of your students, did any of them like read any of the drafts or help you out or like criticism?
Actually, with Extraordinary Bird, because we were at school when The Space Between Lost and Found came out. But with Extraordinary Birds, a lot of them, showed up to my book launch, which was pretty awesome. And I had this was the greatest little connection I had with a former student who came up to me one day as I was it was in the morning and I had just gotten to school, and he came up to me and he goes, "Hey, Miss McGinnis, I read your book." And he paused, and I said, "Well, what'd you think?" He goes, "Pretty good." So and coming from him, that was an amazing compliment. But they were really excited, and it was sweet, and the parents were really supportive, and the community was really supportive. So it's fun. It's fun to get their feedback. So
I bet you have to be really brave to like ask for feedback from kids.
yeah, well, that particular student, I was a little afraid of what he might say. So, and it was interesting. I would say that with Extraordinary Birds, a lot of the boys who read it came up to me and wanted to talk about it, and it was just interesting. So yeah, it's always fun to be there live in person, getting that feedback, and it's kind of spontaneous, and so yeah.
That's so cool. It's like your own little mini like board of editors or critiquers.
Yes, reviewers. Yes.
So then, because you're a teacher, how has the pandemic affected like your daily life, and how has that affected how you write or your writing process maybe?
Actually, as far as my writing process, it hasn't really affected me all that much because I write every day. You remember I was talking about that, that particular time. And so I just get in that zone and am able to kind of, work. But as far as well, we're on summer break right now, but I'm going in this next week to start the new school year. But it was, I mean, like for everybody at the very beginning, it was weird. And it was kind of there was an eeriness to it because it felt like the world kind of had just stopped. And we did a little bit of distance learning at the, to close out the last school year. And then summer started for us because we get out in May and because we start so early. So, but as far as my, writing goes, I still got up at the same time. I usually take a couple hours, and it actually was nice to have that because it kind of removed me and gave me a place to go. And my kids are home, but they're asleep at that time. And so it wasn't easy, but I ended up finishing a draft of another middle grade. And so, yeah, we'll see. But like I said, I'm glad I had that, that outlet, and I was able to continue through that discipline and to use that time and that space to create. So,
which is amazing because that could be hard,
Absolutely, yeah.
In that time of change. So it sounds like it was kind of like a way that you stayed grounded, which is really cool.
Absolutely. That's a good way to put it. Definitely, way to at least kind of create some sort of normalcy,
Yes.
Yeah.
Routine, a reason to get out of bed.
Reason to get out of bed, and that would be my kids, but the writing helps too.
True.
Yeah.
Now, I have one more question, but does anyone else have any more questions before? You can type them in the chat. Unmute yourself. We're a small enough crowd today. It's always easy. So in our middle grade book club, our middle reader book club, we have a lot of incredibly talented kiddos. Incredibly talented participants.
Okay.
I'm trying to break the kiddo habit. We have a lot of incredibly talented participants who themselves are aspiring writers or illustrators even. Some can do like graphic novels. So what advice do you have, Sandy, and Allison, maybe if you feel comfortable speaking to this as well, what advice can you give these kids, these students who want to pursue this as a career, especially because we are often told in schools that it's not a career, right? You got to have a fallback or something. So what advice can you give them?
Do you want me to go first? And then you can close out.
Sure.
I would say the two things I always say are read a lot. So read a lot of other things that you love. And I even as an editor, I like to keep reading a lot just to kind of remember like what it is to like why I fall in love with certain books and sort of like what else is out there. But I say like read a lot of the type of book that you want to read because it just sort of expands your mind. And then my editor answer is to not be afraid of feedback. I always tell people, so my job is sort of like when your English teacher reads over like your journals and your projects and kind of marks it up with a red pen. And that can be really scary for a lot of people. But I say that even people that are like your favorite author in the world or someone who's like really, really famous, they all get feedback on their work. manner. So I think just being like really almost like excited about like getting feedback and having somebody else read it and give you ideas and just like keeping that in mind to like make your book better in the end, not like your book is bad or your story is bad or your art is bad. It just means that like someone else is like really interested in your art or your writing and they want to help you kind of make it so that even more people can connect with it.
And I would definitely echo what Allison said, read a lot. And, you know, when I was younger, I was not a reader. I struggled in reading. And it wasn't until later that I became a reader, but I loved film. And so I actually fell in love with storytelling through movies and through, so I would say, I think it's really important to pay attention because you never know when you're going to be, or when or what is going to inspire you. When I was writing poetry, I used to get in the car with my camera, my 35 millimeter camera, and I would drive around town. I grew up in a really small town, and I would drive out in the country and I would take pictures of just odd things, signs that were hanging on a telephone pole or, you know, abandoned couches along an orchard. And I would use those as inspiration for poems. And what happened as I wrote those, actually voices started to talk, well, I don't know, like talk to me, but those objects inspired voices and characters. So I would say, you know, learn how to pay attention to what's around you and pay attention to, especially if you're, you know, developing character, pay attention to the way people speak and, you know, kind of, you know, do some eavesdropping and, and also write, you know, and it doesn't matter what you write, especially, you know, if you're just starting. Mine was poetry. And I think, you know, the fact that I did start out as a poet really helped me as far as, you know, trying to create a complexity and using a lot of story elements as far, you know, setting and, well, because we were talking about setting in the space between lost and found, but just using that and knowing how to connect to character and, like I said, the subjectivity of the characters. So pay attention is my number one piece of advice.
Love that.
That's amazing advice. Thank you both so much. It does look like a couple more questions came in through the chat before we close out here. Vinitha, I read here that I think you fixed your mic issue. So if you are all set, you can unmute and ask your question.
My question is, when did you decide that you wanted to be an author?
Oh, wow. You know what? It was later on for me as far as like, I think I was probably in my mid-30s before I thought, you know, maybe I should do something with my writing. And so, yeah, I am a late bloomer. So but that's okay because, you know, you got to have something to do as you get older, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's amazing and so true. I love those stories so that kids don't think. Too often I hear from kids like, well, I haven't been dancing forever. I haven't been writing forever. Like, I'm too late, but it's never too late.
Never too late. Never too late.
And Paloma, I think you have a question too, so you can go ahead and unmute and ask your question. Thank you so much, Vinitha.
All right. So my question is, what would you say is the genre of both of your books, and why did you choose that one?
Well, I think the genre would be realistic fiction. And you know what? I don't know how to write anything else as of right now. So I think the genre chose me rather than me choosing the genre. And because my third book is realistic fiction also. So perhaps I will try something. I want to try a mystery. So with realistic elements to it. But yeah, it's just natural for me to write in that genre. So if I wrote a sci-fi, that would be way out of my wheelhouse. Not that I wouldn't try it, but I don't know if it would be very good.
That's what I love, the sci-fi.
Yeah,
Perfect.
Well, I'm going to have to write a sci-fi then. Just
I'm ready for it. No pressure. Well, Sandy, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been such a pleasure. We love your book.
I appreciate it. And thank you for everyone for tuning in. I appreciate it.
Yes,
And
thank you.
yeah, hopefully we can do this again.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
And if you didn't get a copy of your book yet, you can either click on the link in the chat or you can call our store. The number is in the chat as well. We, I believe, have got some signed book plates to go with our books. It's always thank you again. And oh yeah, you got yours, Paloma. Yeah.
Love it.
All right. Thanks, Lauren, and thanks everyone. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great rest of your day.
Take care.
Bye from Second
Bye-bye.
Star.